I think one thing we're always challenged by, and a major goal of the awards program, is really to celebrate the work of Maine and giving the opportunity for, I think in Portland we kind of know each other. We know what other firms are up to. We're very familiar with the works going on, but Maine is a huge state, and we have membership and practitioners all across the state that are doing really important work, and we have no idea what they're up to.
Welcome to Architecture, Design, and Photography, where we are appropriately social distancing today, so don't worry. We're talking about the AIA Maine Design Awards. AIA Maine's first design award program was hosted in 1981. I'll read off some stats for everybody here real quick. The program was hosted biannually until 2019 when it went to annual format. The juried review gives AIA Maine a nice archive of the work of Maine architects over the years. Each submission year is a snapshot of the type of work that is happening in Maine by Maine architects at the moment. There's a few other bullet points here that I'd like to go into more just in the conversation. But to start out, why should anyone care about the Maine AIA Awards? Like, what's the value here and why is it so awesome?
Yeah. Well, I think one important thing about the awards program is that it's really to honor the work of Maine architects. I work for AIA Maine. Jessie Carroll is a practicing architect, and so she can provide that perspective. But I think one nice thing is it really does provide validation for the work of local architects, and the work is reviewed by peers outside of the state of Maine, so they don't have that insider knowledge as to who the work might be from. They're really evaluating it based on the design and the intention.
So go into that a little more, how the jury selection process works and everything else. And I apologize, I completely forgot to introduce Jeannette Schram. Schram. Not Sham. Schram.
That's okay.
Jeannette Schram and Jessie Carroll.
Yes.
And you described what both of you do already.
Yeah.
But so jury selection, how does all that work? And why don't we jury it from people within the state?
Sure. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, as Jeannette was just speaking to, we're trying to give exposure to AIA members across the state, practicing architects, and it's always fun to get an outside perspective on the work being produced in Maine.
I think that's really nice.
Totally. And so as a committee, we get to sit down, I think our committee's up to 10 practitioners at this point, and debate where we want to get our jury pool from. And this year was Wisconsin. And the thinking about that was that they are dealing with a similar climate. They're on our same latitude. And so we thought, hey, let's see what they think of our work. And maybe they're grappling with similar design issues. So they were on our list this year for 2020. And as a committee, we put together a list of criteria that we hope that the jury pool can meet. And so we're looking for things like a diverse jury, both pragmatically, so building types, commercial or residential, stylistically, maybe it's historic, more contemporary. And we also were looking for this year folks that had some understanding of the design excellence criteria by AIA National, which really hits on what was previously called the COAT criteria. So
COAT, like C-O-A-T or C-O-T-E or?
C-O-T-E.
Yeah, so one thing that's interesting about AIA in general, there's so many acronyms and then people within the community know them well, but forget actually what it stands for. So COTE, COAT, is the Committee on the Environment. So I think it's been around since the 70s and really trying to push architects to be thinking more holistically about their projects. Mm-hmm. So this framework that was put together really is the newest iteration of their work, and they're wanting to expand, I think, throughout time. That work was really maybe considered for architects who are interested in the sustainability of their projects, and now it's really trying to make it widespread. Obviously, all buildings have an impact on the environment, and so it's trying to make it more integral to each project, right, in the way that we think about design.
Yeah. So it was important that the jury could read the data that was produced by this new design criteria metrics. So part of that being building performance and other sustainable issues that weren't a part of the design awards in the past.
So is that part of the submission that the firms that submit projects for consideration also submit data from the performance of the buildings?
Yeah, totally. So that's new to us this year, and I have to credit Jeannette and our president, Jessie Thompson, in really making it user-friendly. So yes, we were asking for a lot more data to be submitted this year. It was optional, but we were advocating for folks to submit.
One of those things, it's optional, but you're going to do better if you have it.
Totally, totally. And there are firms that are creating sort of building performance metrics, and there are others that, we're providing an opportunity to provide a narrative. So maybe the calculations aren't produced, but speaking to how they're addressing building performance in their particular projects.
What were some of the metrics? Like, did you give them an idea of like, we'd like these metrics specifically, or is it kind of left to the firm to decide what they submitted? Or
it was totally up to the firm as to what they submitted, but I think what Jessie and Jeannette were able to do is make it user-friendly and kind of this educational tool. So, for example, there's a portion on how your building addresses water usage,
Right.
and or a walkability score, metrics that maybe not all firms are looking at, but along with the...
So walkability will be low if they're on an island?
Totally, yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Or rural
But they can
Maine.
offset that with solar. They're not on the grid.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. And then there's kind of like a description included as to what these metrics actually meant from a performance criteria. So it was a nice, I think, educational tool for membership in addition to submitting a project.
Yeah, I think so. The way we approached it, like we do evolve the Design Awards program every year. We try to listen to what members have to say about what they saw for projects and how they felt the awards were handled the previous year, and then learn from what we're hearing from people, and then try to move forward with that feedback. And so this design framework for design excellence really did come out of the fact that we have a lot of practitioners within the state that really are thinking about the performance of their building. And then as a organization, that's one of our main purposes is to help provide training to architects, is really wanting to share the information that might be top of hand or really easy for some people to work with, and that others maybe haven't fully addressed within their work. And so we wanted to, rather than feel like a punitive, like your projects must be performing well in these areas, we wanted to make it feel like this is a way to highlight what your work is doing if you have that to highlight, and if you don't, like, think about it for the next project and really kind of provide some guidance as to how they might be able to work with that tool with all of their work.
Now, what it says here, takes 10 measures into consideration when discussing the design. Is that for excellence?
Yes.
Did anyone know those 10 offhand? Or
I don't know if I could do all 10, but I'll let you know. So I know one is, this was the tricky one. So design for integration is the first one. And I think,
what's that mean?
So that's where it's tricky. So I think if you were an architect maybe not familiar with this might be where you would critique this framework and say, well, buildings are about more than performance. And so that measure one, that design for, now I'm worried that I'm saying it wrong, but measure one is really where you're talking about that design, that what makes this building special, what makes it worth keeping around. And
because beauty is just something that people will value a structure, but if it's beautiful,
yeah,
if it's beautiful, but just choose through like coal to find.
Right. So it is that balance.
Right.
So it's wanting to take all of those pieces into account. But that first measure is really where you're talking about the beauty of the project and the intention of the project. What is your project about? And so that's, I think, very similar to maybe where we had always been asking people to showcase their work in the past.
Sure. So
it sometimes gets overlooked within those 10 measures, but it's probably, certainly the most important from the, a jury's standpoint. And then there's one for water, one for energy, one for like use of sustainable materials. So that might be reusing a building.
Now, the one about water, how do they measure that? Just kind of how they deal with like recycling gray water kind of thing, or like rain collection, or?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember these
I think
questions.
there was a list of questions, relative to stormwater, gray water, irrigation. There's a handful of
So if you were
different
to, if a practitioner were to dive into this tool, they would find a whole host of information as to how they might deal with water on site. The way we handled it with our Design Awards program was really trying to make yes or no questions out of that framework. So is stormwater managed on site? I don't know if I can think of another example, but we really tried to make it pretty streamlined where we're just really asking yes or no questions, but wanting to reinforce something I'm sure everyone already knows, but that obviously any building does have an impact on the environment.
Sure. But when I look around at the different firms that are really pushing that, and my interaction with firms that didn't push that as much when I first started shooting, it seems like the firms that were intentionally pushing that 10, 15 years ago, had a leg up because of that through the last decade and a half.
Right.
And the firms that weren't have, I've watched them play catch up.
Right.
And it's a great thing to see. I mean, when I first started interacting with architecture and everything else, I didn't really think of a building as being able to supply all of its energy consumption and everything else, and possibly be something that puts energy back into the grid, and you decentralize the power for regions. That's an amazing thing that has really only come into its own as being really possible in the last 15 years, in my feelings.
Right. Right. No, I think it's true. And I think everyone does, you see within the state lots of levels of understanding of how to handle these certain elements. I know energy performance is a huge one that we see, some practitioners within the state are very well versed in passive house design. But I do think it is becoming more mainstream. So, clients are asking for some of these features, I think now maybe more than ever. And so it's really wanting to give everyone the tools to help make the best buildings.
Cool. Any more of those 10 that come to mind?
Okay, so energy was a big one. So that's where you're the questions there were related to whether or not you're predicting the use of the energy within your building so modeling it before you actually build your building. And then if you did predict it, did it meet its expectations or not? Really wanting to use this format as a way to learn from each project. And another of the measures was this design for discovery. So at the end of each project, maybe you didn't meet all of your original criteria. Where did you learn is one of the questions as well. And so I do think the AIA's goal, as they're starting to capture this data, is to kind of use it as a learning tool. So, architects can share information that they learn along the way.
Part of the interesting thing of this design awards competition recognition within the state is as a design community in the state, it's a self-reflective and introspective thing to a large degree. Yep. Kind of checking where are we at with our design aesthetic, where are we at with our performance, and then it was very interesting to me interviewing most of the people that have won to get the answers and how there's similarities between the things that they've learned, the things that they will take to the next project, the things that are valuable to any project that's going to get recognition. Inevitably, it seems like I think probably all architectural projects just have a lot of points of potential conflict that take a lot of perseverance, stick-to-itiveness, thick-hide, and everyone consistently said, you have to have a good client, and then you have to have perseverance, persistence, and a good client.
Right.
Those three just kept coming up in all the answers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what's really great about, AIA Maine is that we are all dealing as practitioners and as architects with this similar problem, which is building. And so we're all, whether it's a home, whether it's a housing, a hospital, impacting the built environment. And we're all sort of grappling with that issue. And AIA Maine, as an association, is trying to provide a place for folks to learn from each other. And so, this year with the top 10 is one way of doing it. Being members or part of committees is another way of doing it. Our awards program and celebration of the work in Maine is another way. But I think there is this constant sort of problem we're facing, which is how do we build smart, and we're all grappling with it in our own ways, and there's a lot of overlap and a lot of areas for learning amongst the community.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the design competition is important in that it creates this ability to share and learn, because a lot of times, I think, just like photographers, architects will be fairly closed off from their competition.
Yeah.
Totally.
Because, you're in a state that's not the easiest. There's not a ridiculous amount of money flowing around this state.
Right.
And you're really having to fight to live in a place like this that's so beautiful and wonderful, but the taxes are high, and you're out at the outer reaches of the country, and you're not in the heart really of anything as far as industry or anything else. And so there's that scarcity of finances that causes to a large degree that competition and closed off nature sometimes. And I think a design competition like this is really nice. I mean, one of the people I was interviewing was saying the thing he liked about this is that you can really take in the projects in one sitting generally, that you can just look at like, all right, here's all the photographs, here's the write-up, and kind of study it and see it there. And it's usually in a setting where they're just kind of focusing on that. Like I find that like with art, I don't really see it until I'm forced to sit in a place for a long time and very introspectively kind of absorb it. So if I'm going to marriage counseling and there's art there, that's the only time I ever really like start to see things in it and feel from it. So for any marriage counselors listening, make sure your art is good. But for me, so what about the different projects? What stood out to you guys from seeing the winners?
I feel like I'm probably the least equipped to share, but what I could share is maybe what I heard from the jury. So when the jury meets, I'm usually a part of the conversations that they're having. And
You were the fly on the wall.
I'm always the fly on the wall, which is really a
Cool.
privileged position to be in.
Tell
It's
us
fun.
more.
It's fun. But they shared, maybe one individual on the jury shared, the projects that really resonated with him. Kind of the through line of all the winning projects was this kind of conversation that the building was having with the beautiful landscape within the state. And so often you get a lot of people that know about Maine, but they have an image as to what the state is. And you do get that sense when I'm meeting with juries, this person probably had experience being in the state of Maine and maybe even did some work within this state. And so I do think there is, when you're highlighting the natural environment and your building is really responding to it, is what this jurist felt was really compelling to him. And then I do think there was, because we were showcasing the work within this framework, there was a lot of conversation about impact that the building might have had on the environment. And the way that we reach out to the jury, their goal and what we ask of them really is just to use their judgment. So we're not saying each project you choose has to meet these certain criteria. We're saying, here's the work presented, here's how we'd like you to look at it. So for instance, if you're looking at a single family home, you're looking at all the single family homes together, and then you might look at the commercial work all together, because we found that allows people to really see that you're dealing with different constraints.
Sure.
But we're not asking them to award a certain number of single family homes or a certain number of commercial projects. So they really have full discretion. And so sometimes you'll see that a project might rise to the top once it once they start to evaluate the full criteria. But they really are able to make that decision just however they see fit.
Now, for people who view this online through the videos and listen to this, how many winners did we have, and what are the difference between honor and merit, and what are the categories that we're looking at?
Do you want to talk about honor, merit? Honor is like a gold.
Yeah, totally. So I will just add to what Jeannette was just saying about relative to how the jury is judging projects. And so normally, there's this idea that design awards are often sort of the pretty picture contest. And
Sure.
I think that it's like absolutely
That's
true.
my part.
Yeah, exactly. And you're a huge part of that. And I think that is often the case when jurists are going through a pile of, potential projects to be awarded. They're given under a minute per project to make a judgment call.
Whoa, really?
Certainly, yes. I've sat on juries before. So there's like the first go through, maybe 60 to 90 projects, depending on where you are in the state. And you're doing your first blush, which projects are worth going in greater detail to decide if they should be an award winner. So in that case, how else are you judging a project but by the beautiful photography?
Yeah.
I think in this case, this year, we're including all this extra data and trying to showcase projects beyond just the photography. And the jurists had the projects digitally for, a week before they sat down and met. So they actually had an opportunity to go through all the additional metrics, to read the project narratives.
So they got way more than a minute.
Way more information, yeah. And so I think, maybe the award winners this year were being judged beyond just the pretty picture contest. We always get the feedback that maybe commercial projects aren't getting enough exposure, or the minimalist home always wins.
Right.
And so when they shoot beautifully, you get the story of the home immediately. Of course, those are going to be award winners. And I think this year you're seeing a move away from that, particularly in the larger projects that are being awarded. And maybe it had to do with the jury pool really having more time to sit down per project. But to get back to your question about the levels of awards, so I believe honor is the gold medal. It's the highest honor or award to be given. And then merit is the next, and citation is kind of the bronze. And again, jurists there's no guidelines. They can pick as many or as few of projects, or they can identify a detail that's worthy of an award, and maybe it's not the whole project in full. But I would say this year we were shocked and surprised and so happy with the amount of projects that were submitted and then the amount of awards given.
Do you know how many were submitted?
I want to say it was close to 60.
I think 63 total. We did have a student category this year, so I think we maybe had 4 of those might have been from students. So yeah, right around 60 from the professional community.
Is there anywhere that people can see all of the project?
Yes, I'm not currently live, but maybe by the time this is on air, you'll be able to visit our website and link to the full project category. We also prepare a book every year, which likely this year won't be ready until the fall. But we do have a book available that shows all the submissions.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think the committee really tries to make sure that obviously we're here to acknowledge winning projects, but really the purpose is to acknowledge all of the work within the state and to show that, I think honestly just my kids would make fun of me if they heard me say this because I'm all like, everybody's a winner here. But I do feel like just including your work is a big win for everyone. I would hope that they feel that way. It certainly is for the organization.
To just have that. Do you put all of them in the book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people can buy the book, or how's that work?
Yeah, so if you come to our event, which we had to postpone this year given the fact that we're not allowed to gather in large groups, we traditionally unveil all the award winners at a large event in May. This year we've postponed that, but last year everyone that came to our event was able to get the book, and then we would have it for sale on our website as well once it's ready.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say that recently, within the last few years, we transitioned the award cycle from a biannual to an annual award cycle, which we're just trying to catch up to all the other states and give enough exposure to our membership. And every year, Jeannette and I feel like, a little more nervous about how many submissions are we going to get. Is there going to be enough awards or submissions to make the awards be really important? And, this year it was great to just see the numbers, and that we are in an annual cycle. The numbers are really high. We're asking for more work from people submitting, and they're still submitting, which is amazing. And the last 2 years, we've been really working on the publication so that it can be consistent throughout the years, so that we can have a consistent catalog. They used to do this in AIA Maine way back, and then it stopped, and then it picked up again the last 2 years, 2 or 3 years, which is great. And it's always funny to go back and see in the archives, like, what was popular in 93.
Yep.
And what are we doing now that we're going to look back on 20 years from now, like, oh my gosh, could you believe this is happening in Maine? So
I'd like to go back through the past submissions and find one like in the 90s that you could take and put today. Like, is there one that would wow, they knew, like, they did that. That'd be neat to see if there's something that matched our today's aesthetic, just because someone was that forward thinking.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is fun to look through the archives. And I think, we don't have, so the books did stop at a certain period of time because everyone was going online. And so we ended up producing like a digital archive. So we do have years, every year we do have the work on record, and it's not just in the book format. But I think a couple years ago, we realized, like, it's so much fun to sit down and flip through all these projects that you do see how design has changed, how it stayed the same, and, who's still practicing. Some of the names have changed, obviously, a lot more names, and now maybe than 15 years ago. But
so what are some of the specific things from some of the projects that stood out to you guys as pretty interesting?
I feel like I have to let Jessie take this one.
I think you're being political there.
Yeah, that's tough. I think that, as a residential architect, I'm like really paying close attention to those projects. And
Sure.
I'm an associate principal at Whitten Architects, and we were lucky enough to win an award. So a shout out to my colleagues who were able to bring that one in for us. That was great.
Such a unique project too, being like over the water,
Totally. And what was so great about that project in particular is that the jury acknowledged the challenge of it. And that's not always the case. And so they acknowledged the challenge, and that was beautiful and wonderful, and it really showed that they paid attention to the project in full, its whole story, not just the pretty pictures, which were beautiful, which you took, Trent, for us. So thank you.
It's easy when the work's that nice.
Yes, absolutely. And Elliott and Elliott, their award this year, they're always, I feel like, in the awards category at some level, because they have that clarity of detail that just photographs beautifully, and they're acknowledging the landscape, which the jury pool this year seemed to be very sensitive to. So like, no brainer award for them, and it was beautiful work. Joanna Shaw with Winkleman, her project also tied to the landscape in such a beautiful, beautiful but restraint way. And so it was very clear to me why that was an award winner.
Yeah.
I think, as Jeannette was saying, jurists from away often are awarding what they imagine to be happening in Maine. So when it fits their image of Maine, that's an award winner. Right. And so those works, to me, the residential ones I'm speaking to, they all fit into that iconically Maine image that I would imagine people from away have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think through. I don't have, maybe my memory is not serving me well for the commercial. I'm trying to think of the through line for the commercial ones, but I do think
Jessie and Phil's project.
Right.
If you get
Paris
into the
Terrace.
if you get into the demand, the program of it, what they had to do,
Yep.
and that they did it
Yep.
was amazing. And for those listening who don't know, every single unit in this, I don't know, 14, I don't know how many units are in it.
I don't know off the top of my head, but they're
all the units they were like Manhattan size.
like 200
units
square feet.
that are bought by people for under 200,000 in downtown Portland, which is kind of unheard of.
Yep.
And I think the whole thing just like sold right out. And it was a very interesting project for all the demands and what they were able to do. Every apartment had a balcony, and it was very cool.
Yeah.
It was, when you see it, you're like, oh, cool project. And then you hear like, here's the demand on this and how the developer came about to the property. The city of Portland had these prerequisites. If you're going to buy this property, we'll give it to you, but you have to do this. And they're like, yeah, now we got to find an architect who thinks they can do this,
Right.
and they did it. It was really cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, that's a great project. I think that was an honor award in the commercial category. And I do think the through line amongst the commercial projects was really the sustainability piece. I think each one kind of was able to handle sustainability. And, that project that you're speaking of, Paris Terrace, not only was it beautiful, but, there is a sustainable aspect to it. And then also, small footprint designing within this urban density situation, which I think, that's one that you'll probably look back on, 20 years from now, and you'll say, oh, that's what was happening in Portland at that time. It really showcases a moment within the city of Portland.
Yeah, another one that was really interesting to me, the name escapes me right now because I can't remember names for some reason. The project that was at the end of a lake in the Bar Harbor area. It was an existing project, and they redid it. It was the one that won for under like 2,000 square feet.
Absolutely, yep.
Oh,
Who was
yeah.
Under $250,000. So we have a category for those small budget projects.
It was a really cool project.
Yeah.
Totally.
And to talk to, I want to say it was
William.
William. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, it was very interesting to. Obviously the people that own this and everything else, the cost and the size wasn't the limiting factor for them, but it was an intentional, like, we don't need a huge house that's going to consume us. We come here and we don't want to just spread ourselves all over the place. We want like a minimalist structure that we come here and we, feel in place and part of the landscape and everything else. And
Interesting.
that was really cool. When I saw that one, I was like, oh, I wish I could have shot that. Yeah, really cool. And the other ones that stand out to me, the exterior on Caleb's building, predominantly, I mean, the interior is great too, but to me, the exterior on that one was very striking as far as how it sat up on the pylons, piers, whatever, and just the overall massing of it and the minimalist of it. Jessie and Phil's project there was really cool. What else? The chandlery, just the challenge of it, everything there.
Yeah.
All really, really great projects, very fun.
Yeah. And
stuff.
I think diverse. Like, I don't feel like sometimes we would hear feedback over the years that it's all single family modernist boxes. And so I do think that there was a lot of diversity in the projects that were awarded, which is always fun from our end, as a committee anyway.
Yeah.
What's been the highlight of putting this whole thing together, and what have you learned from it?
Well, I do think a highlight for this year was our ability to integrate the design for excellence. Is that what it's called now? The framework for design excellence. Sorry.
Yep.
It was, I think, fun to see that come together. I think there's a lot of concerns when you put new stuff and ask more of people than you have in the past. And certainly we were preparing for some critique on that, meaning that, this should be a design awards program and not about performance. That would, some people feel that maybe would be in a different conversation or a different type of awards program. So I think we were preparing ourselves to hear some feedback about that. And we didn't get that. It's not to say that we won't get that feedback, but I think it was executed fairly well for our first time out, and we'll see how that evolves as we move forward. I think it's one of the the Design Awards program is definitely one of my favorite activities that we do as a chapter every year. So it's been nice that we've been able to make it an annual program. It's kind of the one chance we get to usually all come together and celebrate the work in Maine.
Yeah. I think too, just to add to that, being a part of AIA Maine and being a part of this committee in particular, I think the success of the committee you can see by the amount of people that want to participate. So we're up to 10 people, which is awesome. And we're practitioners across the state, and to be able to get together on a monthly basis now, digitally, and talk about issues that our firms are facing that are, specific to Design Awards sometimes, but also just specific to practice, and having that sort of collaboration, I guess you would say, across architects in the state, I think is huge. And for me, that's a huge reason for participating beyond just the awards themselves, but having the opportunity to connect with practitioners outside of your office. And especially in times that we're facing now, where things are getting a little more complicated and people are trying to figure out how to operate and be able to connect with fellow architects to hear, what's going on in your part of the state. How are you handling this? I think it's just such a huge opportunity to be involved with AIA Maine, and specifically this committee of the Design Awards, and having permission to just talk about design and what's happening in Maine, and keeping up.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that's a great point. And one thing that I'm always proud of, like the members that we have that are engaging with our work, is that there really is a collaborative feeling where, you had mentioned earlier being in a small state, are there enough resources for all these architects? And it feels like there are, and that when people are able to share experiences and share ideas, it ends up making better architecture for everyone. And then that actually helps reinforce the narrative of why architects and why architecture is important within the state. So I think it ends up being a benefit if people are able to collaborate.
Totally. Yep. And I think we were just thrilled this year with, the participation of architects in Maine, period, that we were asking for more and they delivered. Yeah. And I think it shows the strength of the profession in Maine, period. And that to me is hugely exciting, and that people are doing good work in our state and are proud of it and are submitting to awards and sharing with everybody so we can all learn is huge and awesome.
Yep.
So you added some stuff to the competition this year, and it's been well received, and probably benefiting the overall practice overall, just to bring something onto the consciousness of the practitioners in the state. Where would you like to see change, growth, and improvement in the future with the Design Awards?
The Design Awards? Do you have ideas?
Or in the AIA in general for the state of Maine?
I think one thing we're always challenged by, and a major goal of the awards program, is really to celebrate the work of Maine and giving the opportunity for, I think in Portland, we kind of know each other. We know what other firms are up to. We're very familiar with the works going on, but Maine is a huge state, and we have membership and practitioners all across the state that are doing really important work, and we have no idea what they're up to. And so I think that has always been a goal, is to include membership across the state, and being able to grow that community geographically across our state. So that's one area I think we're always looking for growth, and also just trying to remain diverse in the work that we're celebrating and the practitioners that we're awarding. And that's always going to be, a challenge too, find juries that are going to recognize a large host of different project types. And I think that's another, always an interesting conversation at the committee level about how we're going to maintain that level of diversity and awarding, broad spectrum, important work in our state.
Where would you like to see it improve?
So I think as
Or
Jessie
grow.
was,
Yeah.
as Jessie was talking, my brain had a chance to catch up. So I do think one thing that maybe we're dipping our toe into this year is working with you and really, I think we want to promote the value of this work outside of our small community. So I think we have a great audience of member architects. Member architects tend to know the value of, of great
Sure.
work. And so how do we then get that messaging out to more people is really where one area where I'd like to see us grow in the next few years.
What is the core focus of the AIA in Maine? Is it to service the practice of architecture within its own community, or is it to kind of spread education about architecture and design out to the general public as well? Or what is the mission and vision of that?
Well, so I would say strongly right now it really is just to provide services with it to our architectural community
First and foremost.
Yeah. But I do think there's always been I do think that we're wanting to marry the public exposure as well and get more in front of the public. And I don't think that I don't think we're there yet as an organization. But figuring out how to do that obviously would provide a lot more benefit to our members as well. But we really are the only only architect-only organization within the state of Maine. So it is important for us to always hold on to making sure architects are leading these conversations that we have as a group. So if there's programming, it's because people within our state who are practicing feel that they're important conversations to have. And it's not because somebody might be having a new product that they want to share to the architectural community, might be a little bit different than other groups might have more specific needs, but ours really is always coming back to the architects.
Yeah, and I think the community involvement or the basically educating the public as to what architects do is in service of our membership.
Sure.
And so that's a huge goal of ours. And I don't think that there is a huge understanding as to what architects do and the services that they provide. And, we get the cold calls too as to what services we can provide. And so educating the public as to what an architect can do for you is a huge part of it.
Absolutely.
And it's, at the end of the day, benefits our membership.
I wonder the different ways that you could start to expand that reach out into the public, continually grow that. It seems like with social media and every entity becoming its own publishing and PR firm, really,
Yeah.
how much that could be utilized and increased, not just through design awards, but just like continual pushing out of, just getting members to start submitting small videos, images, whatever, of everything they have going on, and just creating some kind of engaging, intriguing conversation around all that. That's
Totally.
interesting.
And we have so much, social is very image based, right? And video based is also up and coming as well. And we have so much content because all of these practitioners are submitting beautiful photography as part of their awards. And so a lot of the legwork is already there. And then it's just, what can we do with this?
Right.
Maine Home and Design partnering with us on publishing the award winners is great, but we've got a huge body of work to be shared. And we have our one little publication, which is great. And it'd be great to see that go to the public potentially. But yeah, we've got a lot of content that our members would benefit from it getting out there.
Right. In what ways can Maine, through the AIA being, I don't know if protagonist is the right word, but pushing this, like, I remember going to Minneapolis, and it's like the city invests in architecture. It's amazing. I think a lot of that has to do with the art and engineering influence of the cultures that settled in that area and what they brought with them. But like William, I believe, that did the little house on the lake of Bar Harbor, he was telling me he grew up in I think he grew up in this town in Illinois somewhere, pretty far south of Chicago, I believe, that it was a university town, but they specifically invested intentionally in really high-end architecture for like a lot of their public stuff and everything else. And it's, I think from what he was saying, it's contributed to the success of the town and everything else. And I think like there's Mies van der Rohe projects in this little tiny town, you know, like it became a thing with architects of the time, like, oh, you've got a project in this little podunk town. I think, I want to say it was Columbus, Illinois, but I could be getting that completely wrong. I wonder how we might start something like that for Maine to really, you know, people come to Maine, they know there's going to be a lot of good restaurants. We know there's a lot of architects here, but it's not something that's as easily accessible because a good majority of our incredible architecture is down at the end of dirt roads.
Right.
That no one ever hardly you know, gets to see unless they've got a boat.
Yeah.
You know, but I wonder how we can start to push something like that. Because I look at just even Biddeford, in like Freeport has its thing of like outlet shopping, and Portland's, you know, a fully rounded out functioning city in every way. Biddeford's still looking for its kind of niche, but to me, niche. It's I think it has an opportunity to place itself as a place for art specifically. I mean, artists are getting priced out of Portland.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
you know, but I mean, as a state, how do we push architecture to be something that's more like, how can it get on the radar of, no one comes to Maine thinking like, oh, well, we're there, we need to see some architecture, you know, but how can you do that? How can you start to culturally influence that in some way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure I have the answer. And I do think we're, I mean, there's a challenge even within the state where, you know, sometimes you feel like not everyone feels like they deserve architecture. You know, I feel like some people know that they're going to work with an architect, but I don't think it's the general population within the state.
Right.
But, you know, I think you know, maybe the conversation isn't necessarily about homes when you're thinking about expanding it, but it is that public infrastructure that we really maybe is an easier way to tap into that, because it becomes something that everyone owns, the community owns, the community can be proud of it.
Right. Is there any like architectural tours even around like Portland or anything else of notable? Because there's a lot of incredible stuff that you can even see from the road just in Cape Elizabeth, but at that point people might be getting a little
well, maybe we can come up with our
bus.
own version of the duck tours or something that we get people out to important projects. But I would just add that we had, you know, as a state, a hugely important moment when University of Maine Augusta's architectural program got accredited. And to me, that is setting the trajectory of architecture in the state hugely. So now we are attracting people to our state of Maine that are pursuing architecture as a profession.
That's great.
And I think having trained architects in our state that hopefully continue to practice in our state is huge, and I think will pay dividends down the road in a tremendous way. That we're attracting architects to the state is huge.
Those of a design mind, because as we know, a lot of people who go to architecture school don't end up being
absolutely
architects.
Trying. Yeah, totally.
I remember hearing that statistic and I was like, no way, I'm going to be an architect.
Yeah, well, it's people that care about the built environment, right?
Yeah, aesthetics, built environment, it applies to so much.
So whether they become, you know, registered architects, you know, to be determined, that's a long path. But, you know, people that are trained in the field and can read drawings, appreciate them, and notice the importance of the built environment is huge. And I think that, you know, Portland, we've been seeing it the last few years, is kind of in a place where it's having its own moment, right? And so they can sort of step up to that public need for really thoughtful, progressive architecture that meets community needs, or not. But we're kind of that moment. You know, there's a housing crisis in place, and there's parking problems, and there's going to be a massive influx of people, and how the city decides to handle that is going to be very telling. And I think, you know, the popularity of Portland will benefit places like Biddeford and others. And I think as community members, it's kind of like of our place to step step in and step up.
Sure.
So joining planning boards and being part of the community with all the spare time that you don't have. I think there's got to be like ownership of citizens really to make the case. Sure. Otherwise, we're all going to just sit around wondering what's going to happen. And hey, I hope it's good. So that would be my take. I live in Westbrook, and when I moved there, I went into the town office and let them know I was a registered architect trained in urban planning and would love to sit on their planning board. And
Caleb and I did historic preservation here in Biddeford when we first moved here.
Yeah, I think it's just so important to have people advocating for their communities and bringing their skills to the table to do so.
Right.
So I didn't end up, participating in the planning board, but I think just knowing that there's a potential place for folks to participate is great.
Yeah, and I do think that's one great thing about Maine is you have a lot of impact here. Like,
Right.
In other places, I don't think it's a lot more challenging to have your voice heard on a planning board. But here, if you have an expertise, people are hungry to have you help them. And so it is important if you're at all interested for architects to get involved. We have a number of members who are like within City of Portland Planning Board and then school boards throughout the state. But more of that would be amazing. Absolutely.
So I just had a peanut gallery idea. You guys can shoot this down, but when I do like photograph commercial work or even residential work in other regions, they don't have the same built quality. And there are incredible builders and craftsmen in the state, and I don't know that they have any like Builders Institute of America as much. That's and it's such a marriage of partnerships between architects and builders. It seems like the AIA could recognize in design awards or whatever some type of recognition. I don't know how you do it,
right?
Because
the
they're building what you have asked them to build, but still the execution of that and everything else, it seems like there could be some ability to recognize the incredible craftsmanship and talent of that part of the industry as well.
Yeah,
totally. And yeah, I think we're huge believers in that. Like, you can hand a set of documents to two different builders and get two different outputs completely.
Yeah.
So
that's another thing that people kept saying is like incredible client and really have to have a good relationship with your builder.
Totally. That's the game right there, and it's a gift actually to work with the craftsmen that we have in the state.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. From general contractors to mill workers, it's just incredible.
Right. Well, thanks for coming down and talking about the design awards. It's been really fun interviewing all the people for the videos that we're putting together. I hope these videos get out there and drum up, further and further interest and buzz and everything. Really good projects, and really neat to see them all. Great to talk with you guys about this and the whole process. So again, thanks so much for coming down and talking about it.
Thank you for having us. This is great.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.